Hello there and welcome to the latest in a series of RIABU interviews, where RIABU, be first in line to get paid, looks at the issues surrounding collecting receivables from customers, an area which some say is an orphan, but which has profound impacts on the performance of many companies. And in fact, a number of surveys that I've seen indicate that the main reason that companies, particularly small ones, go out of business is because of cash flow problems arising from receivables payments. So it's a timely issue. And in the course of the next couple of months, we'll be interviewing storied individuals, senior members of industry in Singapore and the region, who have very specific perspectives on why it's important to get paid on time and some of the things that you need to do as a senior executive to make sure that you have your processes structured so that you can in fact get paid. The background to this is the publication of a book called Let the Cash Flow, written by myself and Mark Cloudy, in which we highlight 8 main things that you should do in order to get paid on time. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Sunil Kumar, who's VP of Coforge. Sunil, it's great to have you here.
Likewise, Simon. I think it's a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege. This topic has never been more important than now, considering the effects of pandemic on the businesses, especially small to medium scale businesses is in the verge of cash flow crunches. I think it's absolutely important that every corporation like ours incorporates processes, learns from mistakes that's been done in the past, and without any further delay implements mechanisms to make sure this is addressed at all levels.
Tell us a few things about yourself. I mean, I'm very interested to meet you because it turns out we know an awful lot of people in common.
Absolutely.
But we only met relatively recently for the first time. So at the moment, you're vice president of a company called Coforge. Would you like to say a little bit about what they do?
Absolutely. I think Coforge is an interesting organization which sells digital solutions, which is very relevant in the market today. We are seeing various industries transforming digitally. There's been a lot more emphasis on how they want to transform. This is where we step in. We step in to help the companies that are emerging in digital space and make sure they get the right solution, right advisory, right consultation, and the services we deliver are in line with what they're trying to achieve as a business.
That sounds like the right space at the right time.
Absolutely.
I mean, fascinating and rapidly growing. So just reverting to the subject of receivables, at what stage in your career did you first encounter the challenges of getting paid on time?
I think I would say 5 years ago, when I started getting paid based on the volume of sales that I do, but at the same time, in a way tied to the collections that's happening in the organization. I think that's where it hit me, that it's absolutely important to make sure to keep an eye on the collections and the receivables that's basically affecting me. I think that was where I was an individual contributor. I could see at that level that it impacts me, but I couldn't realize at what level the company is impacted.
Okay.
I think it's been about 7 months since I took my role in Coforge. I think this is where I've realized the importance of having receivables and payments executed on time with clients in a transparent basis without annoying them.
And it's pretty important and it's timely. One of the reasons why we are currently doing these interviews is because there is widespread data. Euler Hermes, for instance, just published a survey to say that the level of insolvencies in Singapore and elsewhere will go up very significantly next year as government support is withdrawn, very often because of a lack of cash. So you very kindly looked at the book that we wrote, and we've basically suggested there are 8 things that a business leader should focus on if he wants to get the money in on time, and you picked 2 of them, 2 absolutely brilliant ones, I have to say. First of all, prompt and accurate invoicing, and secondly, having an engaged and motivated sales team. Should we start with prompt and accurate invoicing?
Absolutely, Simon. I just want to acknowledge that every element in that virtuous revenue cycle is absolutely important. But I think these are 2 areas where I've had personal experience in a way that this could disrupt the business, not only with our customers, but also with our suppliers. So I think the first topic is very trivial in a way, in the way the company operates, but it has significant impact.
Trivial in the sense that people don't take it seriously enough.
People don't take it seriously, and there's not enough governance and validation done before, for an example, an invoice is being sent to the client. And then it goes there, and then the client says, oh, well, this is not something that makes sense to me, so have it sent back. And that's introducing 3 to 4 weeks of delay, which is affecting my cash flow.
But which your customer may not be unhappy about.
Well, there are customers who are audited on the payouts. I think they are also audited on the DPOs. So they're very careful in the way they deal with the invoices. In fact, if I don't, there are certain banks, I think the financial institutions are very careful about it. If I don't send invoices on time, I get reminders from the client. So it's as different as it gets with clients you work with. There are clients, as you said, who would be very happy to send it back with a comma or a full stop missing.
Well, I want to hang on to my money if I'm a customer, but I don't want to feel bad about myself. So if you provide me with an opportunity, I'm very happy to get it, yes?
I think it's the ability, what you called in your book, if I'm not wrong. I think everybody has the ability to hold back a payout, and there could be various reasons for that.
So let's drill into that a little bit, because some might say, well, isn't that rather obvious, prompt and accurate invoicing? But isn't it the case that very often customers have very specific requirements which you need to know before you do any business with them?
I think it's very important to understand the nature of business that a company does with various clients. So what I mean by that is, obviously, we are a technology services company, and we have different contracts with different clients, or sometimes different contracts with the same client. So the mechanism of billing needs to be thoroughly thought through, and there should be flexibility on adjusting the mechanism as in when you sign new contracts. So you could have a simple, straightforward fixed-term contract with a client, which is based on a set of staff-augmented billings, but there could be additional work added to that, which could actually, tilt your billing towards more on the fixed-term, more on the, consumption-based rather than fixed-term.
So you're selling a combination of capabilities and services.
Absolutely.
And so they have to be pretty carefully defined.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is where the awareness and the education in the organization becomes important. So most of the time, it's the sales who are executing the contracts, but the commercial team is supporting them, and the finance and the account teams are disconnected from it. They only come into the picture when you sign the contract and say, oh, you know what, the work has started, so set up the billing system, and then we're going to start invoicing the client from 30 days from now.
So first challenge, revenue recognition. When can you actually produce an invoice?
I think it's again going back to the different contracts we have. There are three mechanisms we have where we have 30 days to 60 days, payment terms with our clients. There's also consumption-based services that we deliver, which again depends on how soon the client can come back to you and say, I'm good with this.
So it requires getting an agreement that certain things have been done and delivered.
Absolutely. We sometimes call it the PCM, percentage of completion milestone. This is very tricky as it gets.
Of course.
So it has a subjective angle to the sign-off, while we try and drive it as objective as possible.
But it does.
It does. And as you said, there's the ability to be taken that route.
Our mutual friend Bill Padfield, whom we both admire, and who sat in this chair a couple of times, talks about deals done on the golf course, where it all sounds really good at the time, but due to woolliness around things like when can I actually bill you and what are the terms are, when it actually comes down to billing and collecting, you find you have an issue.
Absolutely. I think that's where the rubber hits the road, right? So you got to be careful what kind of discussions you're having with the client when it comes to payment terms. It could get annoying. It could actually cause a lot of disruption in their business. The financial teams in the client organizations might not be happy with the payment terms. While in the golf course, you can have a good conversation and say, you know what, you're the best service provider I've ever met, so let's sign this deal.
Well, payment terms are a whole delightful issue. I suppose if we talk about prompt and accurate invoicing, and in a minute we'll move on to the sales team question, because that's even more exciting. Prompt and accurate invoicing, I would suggest, and certainly we write about this in the book based on testimony from a number of people, including Bill, is getting the details from the customer that he needs to have in order to pay your bill. And customers are surprisingly challenging sometimes in terms of specifically what they want. They need numbers, they need receipts, they need proof, they need a signed contract. Sometimes they need numbers put in a particular place on a particular piece of paper. It's amazing how many things they can come up with, right?
You can't be more right. Yeah. I think I could add another 20 things to that list that you said.
So here's a data point, and I've been sort of looking at this area of getting paid on time for a long time, 30 years in Asia and about 10 years in the US and Europe before that. 80% of the time that you don't get paid on time by your customers is your fault, not theirs. And by your fault, I mean it's something you could have done and should have done, or something you did wrong. And this falls very firmly into that area, because if you ask someone, why aren't you being paid on time? He's very likely to say, well, the customer, or the market, but is it actually the customer or the market, or is it?
And I'll add another data point to that. Those 80% of times that you don't get paid is because of less than 20% of the work that you don't actually do correctly.
Yes.
So I think it's going back to what you keep saying in your book, that don't give a chance to have your payments delayed, right? And this is one of the critical things which a lot of time gets ignored.
And sorry.
I was just saying that, that's where we worked a lot in the last 4-5 months to make sure the invoicing that happens from our side is accurate and we don't give any chance for delays in payments.
And sometimes customers are well aware that if they leave ambiguity, they can hang on to their money a bit longer. So sometimes perhaps you have to tease some of these details out of them. Do you find?
I wouldn't do that. But yes, I think it's a test. I would probably try with some of the new clients, because that's where you really get to see how strong their processes are. It's not always about us. Sometimes it's also to do with their internal mechanisms of how the billings are signed off. So, sometimes getting a wrong invoice out could actually give you a view of how their processes work. So it's a learning process.
You can sell some more digital technology, maybe.
It can actually work in your favor.
Win-win for you. That's absolutely brilliant. So bottom line, if you don't get your invoices right, don't expect your customer, however much he loves you, to pay you on time.
100%.
And since 80% of the time you don't get paid, it's because of something you could or should have done differently. This is a really important area to look at. So there's lots more to be said on that. We do go into this in some detail in the book, and thanks for saying nice things about that, Sunil. Why don't we talk a little bit about another interesting area, which is having what we call an engaged, motivated sales team. I mean, surely the sales team is just there to sell things, aren't they? I mean, why should they get involved in receivables?
Well, that's the perception. I executed sales all these years. I think as an individual contributor, I never realized, as I said in the beginning, that it's so important to look at the big picture, and the ARs and the DPOs and DSOs are, something that's alien to salespeople. They don't understand this, to be honest. And that's where the leaders have to step in and say, this kind of knowledge is absolutely critical for every person who's working in this organization, because you can't just have an expertise sitting in one function who can't completely influence the client in terms of making the collections a smooth flow. So to your point, cross-functional engagement, the client experiences from us, is going to be important, because if he sees annoyance from finance team or the collections team, while you have a very pleasant and extremely charming salesperson, that is a complete mismatch and imbalance.
And perceived as a conflict, although perhaps, as we argue in the book, it may not be a conflict. But the reality is that in many, many companies, the salesman is tasked to sell either dollars or volume, depending on the industry, and he may feel that having a conversation with his account about a late payment is not going to help him get that next order.
Well, I think he can facilitate, right? I think what's important to understand is the sales bonus plans play a very important role in the cash flow. Yeah. I've done SBPs before. I've developed sales plans before for the region, in fact, in different countries in Asia. And when you have a sales bonus plan based on bookings, where you get paid the very month you make the booking on the system, you have a major cash flow issue. Right. So that's where collections become an important thing. We've tried to push and negotiate upfront payments, front-loaded payments, rather than having it, spread across or amortized across the contract period. We've incentivized people for having those kind of contract terms signed off. But I think what's important is, in the ongoing basis, 50 to 60% of the payments that is due, which is the AR, gets delayed. And this is where the salesman is not accountable. He's just off the hook, right? Yeah. He's looking at the next new deal that he's going to close.
Well, there are some companies that pay no commission unless the invoice is paid on time. GE, for example, do that, although that's very, very unusual. I mean, it would be true to say, though, that, as you said yourself, many salespeople don't necessarily understand why receivables are important, and they probably lack a basic understanding of why the balance sheet matters. So one of the things that we argue in the book, and I'm interested in your view on this, is that you should start by helping the salesman understand why it's a real thing whether you get paid on time, because he may have the view, well, I know you're going to get paid, this is a reputable customer, so what's all the fuss about? Well, all the fuss is about cash flow is critical.
Absolutely.
And if you don't get the money in on time, one, it devalues your reputation because people aren't sticking to what you've agreed,
right,
and two, you actually have a cash issue. So perhaps building knowledge within the sales force is an important first step.
100%. I think not only the sales team, but also the delivery organizations, also people who are on the ground delivering the services to the client needs to be aware that there is a much bigger impact if they don't probably write a code tomorrow, right? I think going back to your point on salesperson being aware, the business acumen and the financial acumen is important aspects of learning and development.
So the salesman, we would like a salesman who's a little bit broader than just focusing on getting the stuff out the door.
100%. I think selling is one of the important things in our industry, services industry, is we always say this. Selling is not about making a sale. Selling in services industry is about establishing a relationship, a contract which is long term, which is strategic. So if you look at a services industry like us, it becomes a lot more important that salespeople understand this. We are not selling boxes. We are not selling something that turns around the invoice in full payment within 30 days of delivering the stuff. So we will have 3 years contracts, 5 years contracts, sometimes 7 years contract. And this relationship is absolutely important. And the salesperson should be...
He's the person who sees the customer more than anyone else.
Absolutely.
So he's the custodian of that relationship.
100%.
And he's got to own all of it.
I think not all of it. I would say you would probably overburden the person, and then you have attrition kicking in your sales team. But I think what you got to do is balance the load on collections between the accounts, delivery, and the sales team. The sales team has got the relationship, no question about it. But at the same time, we shouldn't push so much load that if you don't get the money, you're not going to get paid. I think that's kind of negative in the way you're building the perception in the salesperson mind.
Yes, I mean I think there are various ways of. So one of the key components of making this a success, I think, is where we're going. Is you need to have variable remuneration for your sales force that is linked in part to whether or not their accounts get paid on time.
100%. I would in fact put a KPI, a dollar KPI, not only as a stick, but also as a carrot. I think it's important to incentivize people who are getting money on time.
It would be fair to say, because there might be some people who are worrying that their sales force are perhaps not ready for this, that not only do we both agree, apparently, that Salesforce needs to understand conceptually why the balance sheet matters, but there are practical challenges in terms of the way that they have conversations with customers. If they've been doing very well for years and selling a lot of stuff, and all of a sudden they get asked to have a different kind of conversation, that may be a challenge. So is it worthwhile doing an extra bit of training and maybe a bit of role play around to how to have that conversation with the customer in a friendly, loving way?
I think it has to be fun. Salespeople are busy.
Yes, I quite agree.
It can't be self-learning.
So a bit of role play?
100%.
By God, you 100%. Could have written this book. That's exactly what we talk about.
100%.
Make it come alive, because some of your salesmen are going to be good at this, and some of them are going to be deeply uncomfortable. I
think they feel that it's not their responsibility to begin with. And I think it's also important to make sure that the changes are not pushed too soon, because you're going to create a different perception of the salesperson and say, oh my God, this is something that's new, I'm not aware of. He's uncomfortable because he doesn't understand that. So you got to coach them. You got to train them. Role play is a great way to move forward. In fact, I would go as far as bringing in a client who's friendly, who's ready to cooperate, whom we've got a good relationship, have him in the room. I'll say, let's see how we're going to ask him for money, right? I think that's a lot more interesting.
I absolutely agree. I think role play is incredibly important. And then you can write down some FAQs and people can understand how you respond to objections and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I would say objection handling is a very important piece of sales enablement.
Yeah.
We did that, but not in the financial space or the collection space, but we did a lot of those for products and services that we used to sell. But I think it has to be expanded beyond that, because salesperson's responsibility doesn't get over as soon as the sales is done.
No.
There's a lot more, like the collections being a very important piece.
Sunil, this has been amazing. Unfortunately, we're heading to the end of our allotted time. We've talked about two specific aspects of the virtuous revenue cycle. There are 8: prompt and accurate invoicing, and having an engaged and motivated sales team. So what I think we've heard is that if you don't understand what your customer needs in terms of an accurate invoicing and you don't get it correct, don't be surprised if your customer hangs on to his money until you sort it out.
I would also say that, wrap it up with this summary that, don't give a chance, as you say. Don't give a chance, but at the same time, make sure that you don't annoy the client.
And secondly, you've got your sales team out there. They're spending more time with your customers than anyone else. They have to be an important part of the discussion on on-time payment, both in terms of bringing on board new accounts where we clearly communicate that this is an expectation. But secondly, as you explained very lucidly, when there are issues, learning how to deal with those issues in a friendly, professional way so that the issue of late payment can be resolved.
Absolutely. I think the coaching is going to be an important aspect of our sales team.
Sunil, this has been absolutely fascinating. Is there any other advice that you'd like to give to our, hopefully, millions of readers on receivables?
I think a lot has been said. I would say read the book. It's beautiful, not only in terms of executing certain processes, but also relooking at the whole strategy in this pandemic. I think it throws a light on why collection is becoming important in this age. So I would 100% recommend anybody who's not doing well in this space to pick up the book, look at the VRC. Very impressed by that whole continuous improvement life cycle of collections. VRC is enlightening, Simon. I think thanks for putting all your knowledge over in that book.
Well, you're very kind. A lot of people would argue that it's just common sense, but it's something people struggle with. Sunil Kumar, Vice President of Coforge, many, many, many thanks for coming along and talking to us. Do read the book. Do read the book. Do look up RIABU online. RIABU, be first in line to get paid. We are great believers that now is the time to focus more than ever on accounts receivable. We're going to see a lot of cash flow issues coming into 2022. Don't be one of them. Get ahead of things. Learn about the virtuous revenue cycle. And we do hope to hear from you. Thank you.